You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and welcome to another second channel exclusive. On my main channel, I just uploaded my top 10 horror animes. However, if you watched that, then you'll know at the end I mentioned that that was my second draft. Now, if you're a regular viewer of my channels, then you know I don't script anything. And so what I meant by second draft was clearly my second version of the video, because I made some changes later on to fix some things that I felt weren't exactly what I wanted. I've specifically removed two series, numbers 1 and 10, and replaced them with ones that I felt were more deserving of the list. The reason I removed number 1 is because I didn't feel it was horror. Although it is considered a horror series, I personally don't think it is. The reason I removed number 10 is partially for the same reason, and also partially because I felt that the ones that I replaced them with both deserve to be on the list. Neither of these videos is by any means definitive, however, the one on my main channel is closer to what I actually think. This one, on the other hand, well, not completely inaccurate, as it does contain pretty much the same stuff other than numbers 1 and 10, isn't quite as reflective of my ideas after I thought about it a little bit longer. So this is my original version of the video. I hope you enjoy. You're watching Fugitive Red Eye, and today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 favorite horror anime. This list is by no means definitive because I have seen way too many anime, but regardless, I'm going to give it my best shot here. Now, there are a couple of things that I included in this that aren't purely horror, but they do have horror elements, so I was debating back and forth whether to include a couple of these, but regardless, I included them anyway. So for number 10, we have Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is more of an action anime and a fighter, but it definitely has horror elements, especially in the first season, particularly when the Titans are destroying the walls and getting into the city. I do feel like it loses some of that horror edge in the second season, when you find out the identities of some of the more prominent Titans, and I do feel like this isn't really a horror series, but it definitely feels like it sometimes, and for that reason I have included it, despite the fact that it's not entirely horror-based. Regardless, if we were ranking it just on how much I like the series, it'd probably be higher up than a few of these, but since I'm going off horror, again, this isn't really much of a horror series, so I couldn't really put it higher up on the list, even though I may like to. If you don't know, Attack on Titan is a really good series that takes place in the past, with this giant megacity surrounded by these walls, and these giant monsters called Titans attack it. But it's a pretty good series. I do think it is a little bit overrated, but it's still pretty enjoyable. Number 9, it's actually a two-way tie, and it's a tie between two series, Yami Sheba, Japanese Ghost Stories, and World of Yamizuken. The reason this is a tie is because they're both very similar series that just tell different urban legends in like a motion comic form, meaning it's not fully animated, but it shows different comic slides with a voiceover on it. The episodes are also very short. Yami Sheba is usually around 11 minutes an episode, whereas World of Yamizuken is usually around maybe 4 or 5 minutes. It's a very good series, and it covers a lot of folklore, which is something I definitely enjoy, so I definitely recommend checking it out if you haven't. Number 8, Biohunter. Biohunter, again, isn't completely horror, but it is definitely mostly horror. It has a lot of horror build-up to it, and it is, at its core, a horror, but it does have a lot of action elements to it as well. Biohunter is the story of this virus that turns people into demon-like creatures, and these two guys that hunt them, one of them actually being one of these demon-like creatures. It's a very good anime. It's only one OVA, but it is very enjoyable. I actually have done a full review of it on my channel in the past. Next up, we have number 7, The Lost Village. Now, The Lost Village, I think, is actually the best as far as being a pure horror on this list, other than the ending. This series is creepy and mysterious for all the episodes up until you figure out what's been going on. This would be much, much higher on the list, but because of the ending, I couldn't bear to put it above some of the other ones. But if we're going purely on which one is the best horror, like which one comes across as the best well-written horror, this wins hands down. The Lost Village is great. It's about this group of people who wants to separate themselves from society, and they go hunting for this lost village. But when they get there, they have this feeling that they're not alone, and they start disappearing one by one, and these weird creatures start appearing around them. It's really good, and it's very creepy up until the end, so I recommend checking it out if you haven't. Next up, we have number 6, Shiki. Shiki is an amazing series about this village that gets besieged by vampires. And although the second half of the series isn't as good as the first half, it's still pretty solid throughout. Ironically, much of the more horrific moments actually come from when the people are killing the vampires, because this series tries to make you sympathetic towards both sides, which is both a good and a bad thing. I think the reason it's kind of a bad thing is it also does kind of humanize the vampires and make it a little bit less scary, but it is still really good. I personally also really like the ending, but some people might not because it is kind of a very polarizing ending. I won't talk too much about it, but yeah. But overall, it's a very good series, so if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. Next up, we have number 5, Yorotsuki Doji. Yorotsuki Doji is a hentai series, actually. And despite that, it actually has an amazing story. I'll be talking more about it when I do a full series review. I have only currently seen the first 2 arcs, so keep in mind, I don't know the entire story yet. But it's about this ancient demon that gets resurrected, and according to prophecy, is supposed to combine the 3 realms of humans, beasts, and demons. That one is also very good, but I can only legally recommend you check it out if you're over 18, because like I said, it is a hentai, but it is a really, really good series. Number 4, Devil Lady. I made a rule to myself at the beginning of this that I was only going to include one of the Devilman series, for a couple of reasons. Number 1, there's too many of them that if I included more than one, this list would be a little bit unfair, and it would have too much of Devilman on it. And for 2, not all of them are actually horror series, and arguably this isn't completely horror either, but it definitely is the most horror-based of the Devilman anime adaptations. To the point where, again, I haven't finished this series. I'm on episode 11 right now, so keep that in mind. But this definitely has the creepiest tone out of all the versions of Devilman that I have seen. As far as the manga goes, I think maybe the original Devilman because of the build-up and the way it goes, but with some of the anime adaptations, that doesn't carry over as well. But this is the story of a woman named June Fudo who becomes a Devilman, which is like a part human, part demon, to fight other demons, or devil beasts as they're called in this series. Devil beasts are looked upon as like a genetic mutation, and that is kind of the case with the manga, but there is more to it later on that ties it back to the original Devilman a little more. I won't say too much more because I'll spoil the manga, but the anime, so far I can tell, is sticking more to the whole genetic mutation thing. Number 3, Another. Another is a hard one to talk about without spoiling it too much, but basically, to sum it up as best I can without spoiling it, it follows this school that many, many years ago a student died. And ever since then, students tend to die year after year in something they call the Calamity. And for the first few episodes, they focus on this girl. She seems to be a ghost, and it seems also like she may not exist. There's a lot of things that go back and forth that are really creepy surrounding her. Of course, by around episode 5, that all gets answered, and then for the rest of the series, they focus a lot more on the Calamity, and it's very similar to Final Destination and the like. But the atmosphere of this series is really good, and I definitely recommend checking it out. Number 2, Higurashi When They Cry. Higurashi, especially the first arc, is probably my favorite actual horror anime, and I'll explain why it's not number 1 when I actually get to number 1. But as far as it goes, if it were just the first arc, this would hands down be the best horror anime ever. But because in the later arcs it becomes a lot less of a horror, that definitely makes it, a little bit less horror-like, but it definitely is a horror series, especially for the first arc. Basically, it follows a guy named Keiichi who moves to this remote village called Hinamizawa. There's a lot of mystery surrounding this village, such as murders, a checkered past, mysterious murders and disappearances that happen every 4 years. Keiichi finds out about this and his friends try to hide it from him and also begin stalking him and acting really creepy. I won't say too much more because it would be spoilers, but I definitely recommend checking out Higurashi if you haven't. And number 1. Elfin Lead. I was not sure I was going to put this on this list, because honestly, although this is my favorite anime of all time, hands down, I don't really consider it a horror series, but lots of people do, and I can kind of see why. Elfin Lead is about this mutant named Lucy, who, to make a long story short, is the next evolution in humanity, and is essentially trying to wipe out all of mankind. She's part of a species called Diclonius, and they all exist for the same purpose. It definitely has some horror elements to it, and the soundtrack itself is pretty atmospheric. I never really looked at it as a horror series, but I guess it kind of is. It's definitely very gory and over the top. The thing about Lucy is she moves in with these 2 unsuspecting people named Kota and Yuka, and she also develops a split personality where she doesn't remember that she's this psychotic killer. But regardless, as I said before, Elfin Lead is my favorite anime, so because I decided to eventually include this, I had to put it at number 1 simply for that reason. As far as being an actual horror, again, I think probably Last Village is the best actual horror, but it's not the best of these series. Higurashi is probably after that, but it's a better series overall. But Elfin Lead being my favorite anime, it had to be number 1 if I put it on this list, and I decided to put it on in the end. Elfin Lead is definitely not for the faint of heart, because it's filled with tons of gore, sexual content, and over-the-top cruelty. In fact, there's still one scene that actually shocks me, which surprises me to this day, because I can watch really fucked up animes. But there's a scene where these kids beat a dog to death, and every time I see it, it makes me feel sick and sad at the same time. I don't know why it is. Maybe it's because I'm a dog lover and that just drives me nuts to think about, but I can handle all the human deaths in the series. It's just that one scene that drives me nuts. Overall, Elfin Lead is an amazing series, and if you haven't seen it, you definitely should, because as I said, it is my favorite anime. Anyway, that's my top 10 favorite horror animes. I hope that list was alright. This video was requested by Rabid Waffles. Enjoyed it? You have him partially to thank for that. But anyway, this has been Fugitive Red-Eye. Have a great day.